Welcome to InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles. If you are designing a research project or founding a startup or drafting your next big proposal for Horizon Europe or Erasmus or whatever, stop. Just a moment. Let's talk about platforms and networks. Today's decision question is the most important one you will face this year. Are you funding the architecture of your own future, or are you locking your life into an infrastructure that was designed strictly to extract value and hold you hostage? So this episode of InnovEU is brought to you by my new book, Transition Science in the Economy. In it, I use data from more than 180 countries, as many as I could find, more than 150,000 data points to show how 5 global shifts, the digital, the green, the new globalization, the transition to a war economy, and the housing crisis transition, showing how those 5 global transitions are collapsing the middle class and rewriting prosperity, sorry, prosperity and power. If you want a clear map of today's economy and economic chaos, search for Transition Science in the Economy on Amazon and get your copy. Okay, so the current narrative tells us that artificial general intelligence, AGI, is going to solve everything, and that the only path to innovation is to basically adopt the models of that tech monopolies are pitching us, blindly adopt those models. But let's hear the reality from someone who has spent his life building these systems. My guest from episode 7, Luc Julia, co-creator of Siri, he leaves us with a brutal warning about capital waste.
That have been done, in 2023, 2024, 2025, 95% of the POCs, they were just thrown away because they didn't give any ROI, right? So we need to breathe a little bit, look, at what it is, and realize that AGI, we don't care. We care about tools that are going to be very good for our main purposes that we are going to have in the different domains that we are going to work for or on.
If 90% fail and AI is just a tool and not a magical intelligence, why do we keep pouring billions into this model? Cory Doctorow pulls no punches when classifying this phenomenon. Listen to him.
I just don't think there's $2 trillion worth of useful things you can do with AI. And maybe after the sector implodes and the 31% of the American S&P 500, that is 7 AI companies that are passing around the same $100 billion IOU really quickly and pretending it's in all of their bank accounts at once. Maybe after that falls apart and the economy collapses and 2008 looks like the best day of your life, maybe when we can buy GPUs for 10 cents on the dollar and hire as many applied statisticians as we want for cheap, and we've got open source models that we can optimize because they haven't put any energy into that, maybe we'll find a bunch of useful things that are cost effective to do.
From a transition science perspective, what Cory describes is the, let's say, natural cycle of consolidation and monopolization. And that brings us to the core of our decision question. How is the hard work of European science and innovation being parasitized? Is that the correct way to say it? Parasitized. Okay, I hope so. Ethan Zuckerman in episode 8, he hit the nail on the head regarding the current model. Listen to him.
So I think AI, as currently conceived, is one of the most extractive technologies we've ever seen. It's begun by extracting value from anyone who's created a written work over the last 100 years or so without compensating people, without asking people to opt out, without asking people for permission. And it has, in the process, reinforced all sorts of biases and prejudices and stereotypes and sort of baked them into models in a way that's very difficult to interrogate and sort of pull out of there. And it's being built around this fantasy of making paid human labor obsolete and essentially turning it all over to machines. Um, so, as a good Marxist, I can't help but be deeply worried about AI futures. I do think there are ways to take aim at these things and say, look, there are some real utilities behind this. The fact that a system can produce functioning code and potentially democratize the ability to create software, that could be very interesting. But it's only very interesting if we manage to build economic models around it that are fairly compensating for the work that this is built on, that are ensuring livable futures for people who are training and building these systems, and that are trying to figure out how to address some of these longstanding biases. And I don't see these companies dealing with that. Even a company that might be laudable on some score, like Anthropic, is not thinking meaningfully, in my opinion, about these questions of who is excluded from their knowledge base, who is not getting the sort of attention and focus and input that they should be having. And this in many ways goes back to my Rewire book, where I am deeply worried about whether the global South will have presence within these sorts of systems. And I would say so far in these AI systems, the evidence seems to be that the global South is largely excluded.
Yeah. Here is the development trap. If you build your scientific project on top of closed systems, whose terms change according to the owner's algorithm, you are not a partner. You are the raw material, the commodity. Your innovation generates data and architectural rents for global platforms, while you assume that all the infrastructure risk is upon you. So this is the platform economy at its peak. Algorithmic coordination replaces price signals, and that lets them capture all the value. How do we survive this? If trying to fight the American model by building massive LLMs and huge data centers in Europe is a waste of money, what is the correct strategy for the European ecosystem? And Nick Srnicek, the author who defined Platform Capitalism, he gave us the map. Listen to him.
There's a lot to be gained by diffusion, but I think there's also a lot to be gained by thinking about innovation, not just in pushing those sort of scaling laws forward and building bigger models and bigger data centers, but also thinking about things like alternative architectures and thinking about the ways in which these AI models today are not just sort of independent things which do everything on themselves. In fact, what's happening is that they're welded onto a whole series of different computational tools. And there's a lot of innovation that could be built into those tools and into the standards which allow these things to be talking with each other. So I think here there's a real space for innovation to occur in a way which doesn't cost a lot of money, but which is highly impactful because you could be setting the standards.
Replacing guesswork with metrics and science is what we do here. As we've seen today, diffusion and interoperability are not just noble ideas, they are strategic survival imperatives. I like that expression, strategic survival imperatives. The digital transition cannot mean abdicating governance to private sovereigns. So the next time you are preparing an application or the roadmap for your project, apply the transition science lens. Avoid lock-in, demand or build interoperability from day one. Invest in diffusion. Do not try to reinvent the frontier. Master the integration of open source software into the real problems of local industries, energy, health, housing, whatever. And number three, think about data sovereignty. If the tool you use can switch off your access tomorrow without recourse, then your project is fragile and lacks resilience, transitional resilience. So true innovation in the next decade will not be about creating the most expensive model. It will be about creating the architecture that refuses to be monopolized. If you want to stay one step ahead of these trends, subscribe to my newsletter Policydoxa, the Transitions letter, where I dive deeper into metrics and tools for leaders and innovators. And don't forget, transition science in the economy. This is where all of this is mapped out with a lot of data, really a lot of data, and rigorous strategy. So share this episode with your consortium, leave a like, and remember, the future is measured, not guessed. I also like this one. See you in the next episode. Hope you enjoy it.